It was good. So recently I made a post on my Instagram story and I asked my followers to ask me questions regarding mixing and mastering, and I'll make a video to answer all of them. Some people sent me really good questions and here's the video with the response. First question that I got said, how do you make a vocal sit in the mix? See, this is a very popular question. It's something that we've all asked as engineers at some point in our engineering career, but it doesn't have a straight answer. When it comes to making vocals sit in the mix, there's a few things that make up for this. Your vocal must be balanced tonally, level-wise, and dynamic-wise. When it comes to the tone of it, it depends on the elements that you have in the song. Every mix is different. Every song is different. Every arrangement is different. If you have a song that's very bass heavy, you've got kicks, drums with so much low end percussions, bass, and a very few top end instruments. You need to make your vocal tonally balance it out. The whole point of your mix, of making your vocal sit, is to create balance. So you need to use your vocal to fill in the blanks or to make sure that whatever was missing is occupied. So in the example that I just said, if the song is lacking in mid-range, you need to make sure your mid-range is strong on the vocal. So you cut off reasonable amount of lows because there's already lots of low end in the song. If there isn't enough top end, you will know you need to have a bright vocal. And if the mid-range is lacking, allow the mid-range in the vocal, as much of it as you can, to remain. And when it comes to dynamics, you already might know what dynamic is, but dynamics is the difference between the loudest parts of the song and the quietest parts of the song. So if you have elements in the song that are very dynamic, maybe the kicks are, the drums are punchy and very busy, there's stuff that's loud, there's stuff that's in the middle, your vocals being so compressed to a point where it loses the dynamics and it's just very, very flat sounding, will sound boring. It won't really sit in the mix. So if you've got dynamic instruments, guitars, with loud parts and quiet parts, you need to make your vocals to match that. Let there be loud parts, maybe the hook part of the vocals could be raised more, allow more highs and lows in terms of how loud the singer was expressing his or herself versus other parts of the song. So I've mentioned the tonal approach, the dynamics approach, and also level-wise. Making your vocals sit in the mix means that they're not louder than everything and they're loud enough for you to hear. The trick with vocal, when I was starting out with mixing, I used to have a hard time figuring out the right way to, or the right levels to put my vocals in. How loud is too loud or how loud is not loud enough. But the trick is this, regardless if you're mixing on speakers or you're mixing on headphones, turn down the volume of your monitoring device to the lowest that you can. Turn it so low you can't hear anything and start bringing it back up. The first element that you hear in your mix is the loudest elements. When you start bringing the volume up so slightly and you can hear your vocals come in, that means you have the right vocal mix. If you start raising that volume knob up and the first thing that you can hear is your snare or maybe a guitar, that guitar is probably too loud. It's from my experience, when I raise the volume up from 0, the first thing I want to hear is the vocal, the snare, and possibly the kick before everything else starts to come up. So yeah, level-wise, make sure your vocals are not too loud or not too low, and use the volume technique that I just told you about to check it. And tonal-wise, that's an EQ thing. Cut where you need to cut. I am not very much of an additive EQ person. I take things out rather than add them in. So I'd rather cut out problematic frequencies than boost the frequencies that I want to hear. So that's the tonal part of it. Then the dynamic part of it is a compression thing. You need to know how much to compress, when you should compress a lot and when you should compress very little. And keep in mind that all of these things I just mentioned are approaches to solving problems. Sometimes you receive vocals that already sound very good. If it was recorded in a proper environment, in a proper studio where there was already compression on the way in, there was already some form of equalization on the way in, you don't have to do the things you don't have to do. If it's not broken, don't fix it. As a mixed engineer, you solve problems, you don't create them. And you don't just go ahead to do things because it's cool or because you did it on the other song and it worked. It doesn't mean it will work on this song. So yeah, I hope I've been able to touch on that. Another extremely crucial factor in achieving vocals that sit perfectly in a mix includes special effects. Spatial effects. So you got to make sure that your vocals match up with other elements in your mix. When it comes to things like reverb and echoes, every instrument in your song or every element in your mix has got natural echoes and reverbs to it. Drums being played in the room come with natural acoustic elements. And if your vocals are bone dry in your mix, they won't sound natural, they'll sound strange. That's the reason you have to add reverb to it and add delays to create sense of depth and space within your mix. And also, if you've got too many synth elements without reverb on them or without any sense of space or distance, and then you've got so much reverb or distance and space in your mix, it'll sound unnatural. The mix won't sit properly, your vocals won't sit properly. So yeah, the echoes and the reverb that you add to your vocals play a major role in getting a perfectly balanced mix. And the second question was your go-to vocal chain. What has to be done? What has to be there to make a clean, crispy vocal? It takes us back to what I just said. There isn't a one-size-fits-all fix to vocals, to making it clean, to making it balanced or whatever. I do have a vocal chain that I go to with a bunch of tools that I use very often, but trust me, no 2-3 songs of mine are the same. There are sessions that I open and I don't need to de-ess stuff. There are sessions that I open and I don't need to compress 3 times. Maybe once is fine, maybe twice is fine. There are sessions that I don't even equalize. Sounds stupid, but that's just fact. However, this is what my typical vocal chain would be, assuming that the vocal was as raw, as untreated, unprocessed as it can be. Coming in, I would have a noise gate, something to make sure that the background noise in the recording is gone or whatever that's just there on the noise floor is eliminated. But like I said, in a case where there's no noise in the recording, obviously I won't need a noise gate. And after the noise gate, I would have a breath removal tool. I use Deep Breath by iZotope RX. So that tool helps you cut off the when singers are singing or rapping, whatever the case might be. So the breath removal tool is a handy tool in my toolbox, in my vocal chain. And from there, I'll slap on a de-esser. 9 times out of 10, there's bare sibilance in vocals, be it singers or rappers, most especially singers, especially people with lighter and higher range, higher pitched voices. The de-esser is just there to do some light 2-3 dB of gain reduction on the sibilance. Depending on what de-esser you use, it might be a thing where you're manually finding the S's, or it could automatically pick up the S range for you. And after the de-esser comes my first EQ. I like to equalize before I compress, because in my opinion, I cut off the things that I don't want first and I start working on the things that I do want. So with the EQ, I slap it on there and I take off what I need to take off, most typically low ends, low mids, and any other frequency that I might find. And the third thing was that. So we had noise gate, breath removal tool, de-essing, EQ, and the next thing on there would be a compressor. This compressor just takes up the level to match other things in the song. If the instrumental wasn't overly loud in the first place, the stems of the instrumental, even if it was, I would put it all on a VCA channel and bring it down. But I try not to mix too low. I mix about -3, -4 in my master channel as headroom, because what I feel is the more that I mix quietly, the more I have to boost them in post, in mastering, and just take up the noise floor again. That's a necessary practice for me, so I tend to mix loud. Yeah. So the first compressor is to level match the vocals, take them from wherever point they were at to a point of balance, initial balance, and everything else that I'll do will build upon that. And this first compression does typically 2 or 3 dB of gain reduction overall, never over 5 dB. At least I try not to, except I really have to. And after the first compressor comes another EQ. So now that I've compressed a little bit, there's some more frequencies that will pop out and show itself that I probably didn't hear as much before the first equalization. So I'll grab the EQ and do some surgical removal, cut here, cut there. I might boost a little if I need to, just to shape the tone, and I put on another compressor again. This is the final compressor. Now, quite typically, I love to compress. I compress things a lot. If you see my total gain reduction on a vocal, you might think I'm crazy, but that's just how I do it, and it works for me. It sounds great. So the second compressor would be my final compressor, and yeah, I'll go ham on that. And after that compression comes saturation. I like tape saturation a lot. I've got a few from Universal Audio, the tape, I can't remember what it's called right now, but I have a visual representation. I'll put a screenshot of that plugin on screen right now. Yeah, and there's some from Waves as well. There's saturation from FabFilter that's really nice. So yeah, saturation is always in every vocal that I work on. There's likely tape saturation on 99% of the songs that I've mixed on vocals. And after that, I create a bus to send the lead vocals or the whatever vocal it is to the delay if I need to. Some songs don't need a delay, but most songs do. Send it to a delay track, send it to a first reverb, send it to a second reverb. It all depends. And then send it to another bus with secret sauce on it. And it consists of a flanger, a doubler, and some form of oscillating plugin. And I add so little of that you won't even notice that it's there. It's there, but you can't hear it, I bet you. And that's like a secret sauce to me. I wouldn't mind showing it to you because I don't gatekeep, right? You will make the best out of it in your own way. It won't be the same as mine, so I can't even call it a secret weapon because I learned it from other people as well. Another follower said, everything. We need a learn how to mix from scratch class/course. Honestly, you can learn everything you need from scratch on YouTube. I do post tutorials here and there on YouTube. I've got tips and tricks. I hate the word tips and tricks, but I've got tips on mixing and stuff like that. In my opinion, the only reason a person should buy a course, a mixing course, or take a mixing class is only so you can learn the right arrangements or learn stuff in the right order instead of learning things in different parts and then piecing it together. That's the way I learned. That's the best way I would say. However, it takes you more time. But the thing about learning in pieces is you get to learn so many things. You get to acquire and accumulate so much information that will make you improve on your art over time. Not quicker, but over time. So yes, maybe I will put together a course or some form of curriculum and publish that so you can figure out what to learn first and what to learn next. But when it comes to learning anything, mixing included, you just need to go online, gather as much information as you can. Other engineers will tell you what they do step by step. Everyone's different, and you partner with artists and producers and be around as much engineers as you can, and you will learn. There's really no magic tutorial or class that will teach you everything that you need to know, because nobody knows everything, but everybody knows something. Another subscriber said, if you were to pick one microphone, what is your all-time recommendation for a mic? You see, microphones are like cars. You're not going to take your C250 coupe to an off-road journey where you're going into forests and cutting down trees and driving up the mountains with it. I mean, it might work, but that's what four-wheel drive SUVs are made for. And you're not going to take your G-Wagon to have a nice cruise in the evening, because that's a loud car, it's a fast car, it's not really fun to drive. You see, different microphones serve different purposes. There's microphones that are good for bright vocals, There are microphones that are good for deep vocals. I'm not a recording engineer, but I do have a little idea of what mics work best. When it comes to vocal recordings, you want condenser microphones. Dynamic microphones do work for performances, but for recording, I personally don't pick dynamic microphones like the Shure SM7B. It's a good microphone, but it's not a great mic when it comes to recording studio grade vocals. It's geared towards more to broadcasters and radio users, stuff like that, podcasts and them things. So when it comes to microphone, I would say a good condenser microphone, just as much as you can afford. I've used the Rode NT2A for years. I've had some experience with the Neumann TLM103 and that works as well. So all-time recommendation, it depends on your budget. You could buy a Sony microphone, you could buy a Rode microphone, you could buy a Neumann microphone. Just get the most expensive one that you can get. That's a condenser microphone, will serve your purpose for vocals. Which app do you use to mix music? I use a software called Logic Pro. It used to be Logic Pro X, but the X was removed. It's just Logic Pro. I started off in Cubase and I moved to Studio One. I am proficient in FL Studio, but I do pretty much everything in Logic Pro these days. When do you know a mix/song is ready? Do you have a checklist? I don't quite have a checklist. I've been doing this for so long and it's a feeling at this point. When the song is ready, I can tell it's ready. When everything sounds good, I know it sounds good. I mean, visually, I can see all the things that I've done to it, and if there's something missing, I'll try to check it out to see if that works. But I'll say it's just a matter of the ears. You get to know when it sounds good, just stop pushing it. Try to cut off the habit of leaving stuff that you think are done and coming back the following day or the following week to tweak, all in hopes that you can improve it. Half the time you're just ruining what you already made. So when it's done, it's done. And I have analyzers and meters instead to measure the loudness and to measure things like tonal balance. And when it comes to deciding if a mix is done or not, I am very big on referencing. I reference all of my songs. Every song that I mix, I find a reference track for it. So it has to be a song that's already released, a commercially successful record. Play that alongside my mix and see if it sounds like what it's supposed to sound like, if it sounds good enough for the market. Usually one song might not do it for you. You might need like 2 songs or 3 songs. So play a song on Apple Music or Spotify, pause the song and play your mix, the MP3 export or the WAV export of your mix, and see if it sounds close enough. If it doesn't, if your mix sounds too dark between 2 songs, you need to brighten up a little bit. But when you get to the sweet spot of your mix sounding not as bright as one, but darker than the other, somewhere in the middle of 2 songs, tonal-wise, balance-wise, loudness-wise, that's good. You're done. Just send it to the client, send it to the artist, and hear what they have to say. Sometimes they're fine with it, and on few occasions they have tweaks to make. It just depends on your circle of artists, depends on your type of artist, depends on how much they trust you. If they trust you to make great mixes and you trust yourself to do the proper thing, you will have less recalls, you'll have less edits to make after each session. Last question said, how did you blend photography, music, and videography together? You see, the thing that most people don't know about me is that I picked up a camera before I picked up a mic. Let me explain. I started off playing music when I was really young. I was probably 14 years old playing keys for my church choir, right? But when it comes to photography, my mom loves photos. She's got a bunch of photo albums that's been with her for years of her childhood, her siblings, her friends and family, her kids, my siblings, myself included. So growing up, I have seen photos to be a major part of life. That's how I saw it, and that's how I still see it right now. When I finished secondary school, I had a job at a photo studio. So I learned how to use cameras. I started taking pictures of people. Sometimes I'll be alone by myself in the studio and take jobs and just... So yeah, I am very familiar with cameras. I'm very familiar with media, with videos and stuff. And later on, I progressed from just playing an instrument to learning how to produce. And I transitioned from being a producer to a mix engineer. So music has always been there photography has always been there. And in the past few years, I started making videos for YouTube. I started learning to, or deciding to make video tutorials like this one for YouTube, to pass on the information that I have gathered over the years to other people. And that's when videography came into the picture. I started learning how to use cameras in the context of video, because cameras, when it comes to photography and videography, are different skill set. There's so many things you need to know that are different about these things. So I went on YouTube and learned a bunch about videography. But considering that I already have prior camera knowledge, these things are not very new to me. It was easy to learn quickly. And I would urge every creative person to acquire more than one skill. If you're a music producer or a mix engineer, and if you can learn how to use cameras, trust me, you will be better off. And you have to pay less money to certain people. You can make your artworks yourself if you learn how to do graphics. Learning multiple skills is just something that I think every creator should look at. It's a cheat code in life. I've got multiple interests: cameras, music, cars, computers, tech in general. I get curious easily, and that's just it. I feel like if you have multiple skills, you'll go far in life, because it will be easier for you to integrate with other people, walk into rooms that you normally wouldn't walk in. And it just helps generally with your art and your creation process. So yeah, that's all for now. It was a wonderful session giving responses to these questions and just speaking plainly to the camera like this. I'll probably make another one. If you watch this and you liked it, you want to see more videos like this, just let me know in the comments. Like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. I'll see you again on the next video. Bye.